If you're in Google Sheets, you're entering dates. But if you're anything like me, you've spent way too much time typing them in manually. So let's look at some ways to streamline this process. So let's start with a simple example of autofilling 12 calendar months. And so here is the formula we're going to use to do that. Now we can do it manually, and you can select, let's say, the first of the month. And then if we come down to the next cell and put in February, just like that, so January and February, we can now select both of those and then drag down to fill that whole year. Or we can use a formula to do the same thing. Now, why would you want to use a formula instead of just dragging that down? And it comes down to this. I can simply type in this cell and the whole thing changes automatically, whereas it does not change in our manual example. So that is a great reason to use that. So let's take a quick look at this formula because this is essential to understanding how all of these functions are going to work. So the first thing is array formula, and it is wrapping the rest of our function. And so all it does is allows it to fill into multiple rows or multiple columns if you use it transpose, but it's not essential to understanding why and how this function works. Let's remove it for the moment. And if we hit this, you can see it's showing the first one, but not showing the rest because we don't have the array formula. Let's jump into what we're doing here, and then we'll rebuild this. So we're using a date function. And what a date function allows us to do is put a year, comma, month, comma, day in that function, and it returns a date. So here we can see if we change this to 1, we have January 1st, 2026. Change this to 2, now we have February. And so what we're doing here then is instead of putting a single number for the month, we want 12 months. And so we use this sequence function because what the sequence function does is it repeats the number. And so let's go ahead and pull this out right quick and put it in here. And so you can see that sequence repeats and starts at 1 and then goes to 12. So let's go a little deeper in the sequence because we are going to use this in the rest of these functions. So in the sequence, we start with rows. And so this is 12 rows. And then the rest of these are optional, but there are defaults. So the default is 1 column and starting at 1 and step of 1. So the step is how big the increment is. So in other words, this is going to start at 1 and then increase by 1 every step or every row. So we could do something like this and we'll get the same result. Now we can increase the start. We could say, let's say 11. You can see 11, 12, 13, etc. We can change the number of rows we want to return. So for example, 10, and we could change this to 1, for example, and now we have 1 to 10. We can change the step size. So we could say 5, and maybe we'll change this to a start of 5. So 5, 10, 15, 20, etc. So as you can see, you can kind of play around with this and see how that works. Now we can use this to our advantage because if we go back to our example here of 12, if you notice, each month starts with a number and it corresponds 1 to 12. So when we do this sequence, we can basically generate January through December. Now at the moment, it's only showing in the one cell. And so that goes back to where we started. If we wrap this in array formula, now it'll autofill that entire year. Okay, so now let's take that same logic and next we're going to autofill a year. And so if we go over here, you can see our formula is actually very similar. So in this one, we have our sequence in the month slot. So remember in the date function, year, month, and day. Now if we go over here, we have it in the day part. So year, month, and day. So what this allows us to do is show 365 days for the year. So if we scroll down, you can see it goes all the way down to the end of the year. So we can do this manually again. So this time we can put the first and the second of the year, and then we can drag this down just like that. Perfect. Now let's show one quick modification. So we have this array formula, it's from the whole year, but what happens if maybe you don't want to show everything? You only want to show up to today, for example. So in that case, we can start with putting in the first day of the year. And then the next cell, we're going to use a little formula. So we're going to say if H6 is blank, do nothing. That's what's doing here. You may see this often like this with a blank string. We can actually leave it blank. And I'll show you why this part is necessary in a second. Now the rest of this is probably going to make more sense. So if H6 plus 1, so if you're wondering what that means, it's what's 1 day plus this date. And so if that's greater than today, then again, we're going to display nothing. Otherwise, H6 plus 1. So what we're saying is January 1st plus 1 day greater than today? If so, we're not going to display anything, but if it isn't, let's add a day. So for example, here is H6 plus 1, so that's January 2nd, is that greater than today? So as of recording this video, it is February 13. So is it greater than February 13? No. So we're going to add a day. And so let's go ahead and drag this down. And if we go down, we're in January, down a little more, now we're in February, and we're getting closer. So 13, and now it's blank. So if we come down to the first blank one, if we do this, we can see February 14. Now today is 13, so is it greater than today? Yes. And so that's why we're returning a blank. And so if we go to the next one, if we're looking at this, well, there's no date here. So that's why we have this fallback here. If it's blank, then let's do nothing. That way we can keep dragging this down. So what you want to do is drag this down, for example, for the full year, and now it's in place. So every day, a new date's going to show up. So tomorrow, it'll say 2/14. Next day, it'll say 2/15 right here. So this is a quick and easy way if you want to autofill up till today. All right, so that little deviation aside, let's go to our next option. And this one's also pretty simple. If you notice here, so array formula and date, just like we've been doing, there's the year, and then we have our sequence again, but this time we have the slightly more complicated. So why is that? Well, we're doing quarters. So if you think about it, a quarter is every 3 months. So what we're doing is we're going to do 4 quarters. That's what we're doing here. And we only need 1 column. And we're going to start with 1. And then every step or increment is going to be 3 months. So that's what's happening here. And then it fills in just like that. So again, we can change the year here and that will automatically increment. Now, one thing here is you can actually do more than 1 year. So for example, you could do 8. And there we go. Now we have 2 years. And that actually applies back to this one as well. If you want to do more than 1 year, you could do 48 and that will do 4 years. You can see that and so forth. So the advantage of this as well is, let's say you're doing a payment plan and you selected the number of months above. So let's say we did 12 here. Looks like we have a date validation there. Let's go ahead and remove that real quick. So let's put 12 months in here. We can actually feed that in right here. And so then let's say 24. We scroll down, there's that. Go back to 12 and let's go to 6. So you can see this automatically fills in based on the number of months that we have selected. And so you can do the same thing here with the quarters. You could have an option where you set the number of quarters you want to display. All right, so next let's look at a variation of what we did here. So here we did a fixed date here, and then it was formulas from then on out. So here we're going to move that up, and then we're going to use a different version. So this one we're using a formula, and we had drag it down each time. Now this one we're using an array formula, so this is a little more complicated, but the essence is actually pretty simple. So again, we have our array formula, so we already know how that works. That's just showing this across all the rows. We have our date, and then here what we're doing is we're looking at this date, and we got to get the year out of it so we can populate our year for our date. And then we're grabbing our month from that date. And so it's a little more confusing than these because these were just putting in a year. So the only thing we're getting was the year, and we didn't have to wrap it in year because it already was just the year. But this one's a date. So if I just put L4, it's going to take the whole date, not just the year. All right, so that being said, let's jump into the sequence. So what is going on here? So really all that we're doing in the sequence here is we're coming up with a number of days, and we're using another little function here called DATEDIF, which is determining the difference in days between this date and today. So let's go ahead and pull this open real quick. So DATEDIF function works like this. You put in one date and another date, and then you put in the unit, and D means day. So we're determining the number of days between this date and today. And then what we're doing is adding 1 because this is the difference, not including the day. So it's actually going to be 1 less than if you include today. So if you aren't including today, then you can remove this +1. And so what this does is date difference between January 1st and today is 43, or that would be technically yesterday. And then we're adding 1 to get to today. And so we scroll down, this should be 213 as the end. So if you wanted to only go to yesterday, then you can go this, and now it's just going to go up through yesterday. You could also do it +2 if you want to show tomorrow as well, just like that. All right, so let's jump in. We're almost done here. And so let's go to autofilling an entire month. So to fill a month, it's similar to the day thing over here where you can autofill a year. So here we can start with, the first day of the month we want, and then we just have to scroll down and we're like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Somewhere in here, right? You're maybe trying to count, and there's only 30 days, so now I went too far and I have to delete one. So that can be a little annoying. So if we do this formula, then we can do the same thing. So what we just did over here was a DATEDIF, and so we're going to do the same thing in this one, except for we're going to add one more. So we keep adding another level of complexity here, but allows us to simplify what we're doing in the end and to automate it. So we're doing the same thing here. If you notice, we had that year, and we're looking at that date, month, we're looking at that date, and then our sequence, and then there's DATEDIF. So in the DATEDIF, we're again taking that date, just like we did over here, but instead of comparing it to today, we're comparing it to the end of the month. So EO month is going to find the end of the month for a specific date. And so we're taking this for 1/2026, and then 0 means look at the same month. And then again, we want the difference in days, and then we're going to add 1 to get to the final day. Because if we look at this, so date difference between April 1st and the end, so there's 4/30. If we look at this DATEDIF, it gives us 29. So there's not 29, there's 30 days. So we need to add 1 to get us to the full 30 days in April. So again, if we scroll down, there we go, 4/30. So if we change this to, let's say, February, and there's 28 days, we scroll down, sure enough, only 28 days. Just like that. All right, so next, how do we do this then if we only want this to show until today? So we're going to take this formula and we're going to add one more level of complexity. But this really isn't that challenging. If you look at this formula, it's just a couple different pieces that we're tying together. So the array formula on the outside, we don't have to worry about. It just works automatically for us. Then we have our date. And so on our date, we're just putting 3 elements, our year, month, and our days. And that's it. So all we got to do here, though, is we got to figure out, well, what is first? Today or the end of the month? And so we have our end of the month here. So what we can actually do is use this thing called min function. And so minimum is going to find the smallest value. And so what we can do then is put today and the end of the month, and there we go. So there is our formula. So it actually isn't that complicated. All we're doing is a couple different levels or layers in that formula. But if we break it apart into the individual components, it's actually not that complex. And that holds true with a lot of formulas. They may look very complex and very long, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's just some simple things that are strung together. All right, so let's wrap up with a weeks. So we have a start date and the number of weeks we want to display. And so we could, again, do this manually. Let's maybe rewind this to, maybe we want to do Friday, every Friday, something like that. So go back to January. So 2nd, 9th, etc. So once you have 2 again in a row, it should be able to pick up that pattern. So 16, yep, it's a Friday. So we could do this and then drag it down and get our weeks for the year. Alternatively, if you want to be able to just put into a cell and then generate automatically, we can again use a formula just like this. So let's go up here just for the sake of ease. So again, array formula on the outside, and then our date. Again, we're grabbing year and month. And so really all that we're changing here is sequence in the days. So this one, you may be wondering what's going on here. And so what we have is how many rows. And if you notice, that's just number of weeks. So we could even put 52 weeks there, just like that. And it'll work the same. And so the only usual thing here is we have the day. And so we have the year and the month, but we haven't used the day before. And why are we doing that? It's because we want to make sure we're starting on the right day of the week. And so let me demonstrate this real quick. So if we started on the 2nd, you can see now it's starting the 2nd, just like this one. But if we put 1 here, it's going to start on the wrong day. It's going to start on the 1st. So the reason why we need that is to make sure we're starting on the same day of the week. And then let's go ahead and tie this back. And now we could set this to something like 4 weeks. And you can see we're just populating 4 weeks there, just like that. All right, so that is it for today's video. If you found these formulas confusing, I would recommend starting with one that you're going to use regularly. So for me, it's this formula. And then just make a habit of using it regularly. And then soon it'll start to become more familiar and easier to understand. So that's it for me. Make sure to check out the other videos on our channel for more tutorials on both Google Sheets and AppScript. And as always, have a great day.